Good morning, everyone. Good morning. There's our sound. Good morning. Yeah. Blink, blink. It is on. Okay, so I have it on. Oh, it's not on the. Good morning. There we go. Thanks. Hi. Good morning, our in-person attendees and guests, and good morning, our virtual attendees and guests. I'm Sarah Fry, the state lead for computer science here at Patton Central. On behalf of our team, our executive director, Dr. Angela Kirby, our leader here, Sergio Anaya, I saw you somewhere. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 Computer Science for All Pennsylvania Summit. It's a mouthful, right? We like to just say CSforALL PA. I have to say it is thrilling for the summit to return to Patton Harrisburg after 2 years of living fully virtually of the summit. We are excited to engage with you here in person and through our hybrid format. So if you're Zooming in with us today, we're so glad to have you. I have to say thank you to our technology staff and our facilities for helping us get situated both physically and virtually. And I'd also like to thank a few special guests who are here today. First off, we have some really awesome, I would consider them VIPs, considering what we're here to do and talk about this week. We have some students who are some of this year's winners from the Central Pennsylvania NC WIT Aspirations in Computing Award. If you're not familiar, there will be a session this afternoon about the NC WIT Aspirations, but the award is given annually to recognize high school students who are women, genderqueer, or non-binary for their computing efforts and literally their aspirations. So with us here today, you may want to give them a friendly wave. Don't corner them, but give them a friendly wave. We have Isabella Richard. Hi, thank you for being here. We have Caitlin Hopt. Caitlin.
Recording in progress.
And we also have Kiki Billis. Hi, Kiki. Hey, we are recording for those at home. Thanks. So thank you, students. If this is your first time at the summit, this is an awesome opportunity to bring together so many different partners to support computer science education, from those of you in classrooms and school buildings and districts, those of you at our intermediate units, our higher ed partners, our families, our parents, our out-of-school learning supporters. You may see some folks kind of closed off in a think tank today. We are honored and pleased to have our Pennsylvania Counselors for Computing group back here with us this year, a very valuable member of our CSNPA family. So if you haven't seen, our theme for this year's summit is Turning Points. And I've been really thinking about this week as we've kind of come together in person to prep for this week's events. I'm thinking about this idea of turning points. I think we can all recognize that we are at a turning point in education, broadly speaking. The past few years have thrown some interesting and complicated challenges our way. We have faced unimaginable barriers and challenges, and we continue to work through them together. We are reiterating systems and processes to try to meet the needs of educators and obviously their students. So thinking also about turning points, this year's summit is a turning point for CS education and of course our summit, right? We're coming back here to Patton. This year, we are, I don't know if I would call it a celebration or just an acknowledgement. It's been 5 years since Dr. Kirby welcomed us all here for the very first Computer Science for All Pennsylvania Summit. So we'll hear from Dr. Kirby tomorrow about some of the vision that she had to help lead this work and what we can take out of this week's learning together. But coming back here after 5 years, there's a lot to be said about the work that we've been putting together, literally together. We are so grateful that 5 years ago, like I mentioned, Dr. Kirby welcomed us here, and that computer science education in Pennsylvania became a priority of the governor and of the Department of Education and of the Bureau of Special Education. When we joined together here 5 years ago, there were some data points that really led all of our discussion. And maybe I'll get to see them. So these data points really were the focal point of those conversations and a lot of the work that was coming out of Governor Wolf's PA Smart initiative and CS and PA. We were focused on the fact that there are a lot of opportunities for computing career pathways in Pennsylvania, but we weren't putting our students on pathways to take advantage of those opportunities. At the time, that school year, when Governor Wolf launched the PA Smart initiative and Dr. Kirby said, open the doors of Patton for CSforALL PA, there were over 17,000 open computing jobs in Pennsylvania. Yet, we only had about 2% of our K-12 students in computer science courses. In fact, we were really only tracking student enrollment for 7-12 students. So 2% of our students were having any kind of glimpse or touch point with computing, maybe in hopes that they would pursue that in college or their career pathways. So where will this data take us in our learning this week? Well, we've got some updates. Pennsylvania still has plenty of open computing and computer science jobs. We still hover around that 17,000 mark. But we've made some progress, notable progress in how we're engaging students in computer science learning at the K-12 level. So it jumped from 2 to over 20%. We're at around 24% of our students engaged in CS learning. But it's important to recognize that while we are, we made notable gains overall with student enrollment in computer science, there are big gaps that remain. We are seeing notable gaps for our underserved populations, especially our English learners and our students with disabilities. In fact, over this 5-year span, there was no measurable increase in enrollment for English learners or students with disabilities in computing courses. That says a lot, right? Thinking again of this turning point, there's not an obvious path forward for us, but we do need to find our bearings. Achieving CSforALL really does require all hands on deck, all of us invested and working together. And I really hope that the time that we spend together this week allows us to share, to reflect on what we have learned over the past 5 years, and to reiterate our plan for moving forward so that we can continue to grow that number of enrollment, not just overall, but specifically for those students who we've been leaving out for so long. Now, thinking of this idea of a turning point, it's interesting that we've all faced turning points in our own CS journeys. There's so many of us, I think, that we didn't dream of being involved in computing or computer science education, right? I was an English and social studies teacher. In fact, when we have these conversations across the Commonwealth, so many teachers are like, well, I'm not really a CS teacher, but I do stuff with CS. And so honoring what our involvement is, whether you're a CS teacher by role or title, or you have some type of engagement with it, we are glad that you are here. And your perspective and your time and energy are so valuable. We're really fortunate to start this week off with someone who can really empathize with that, who was not a CS teacher, but who has had a remarkable journey in CS. So she's joining us from right down the road, but her professional career has taken her all around the world. And she has hopefully a lot to connect with us about this morning. Our keynote speaker, I'll flip it over so we can see her smiling face. Minu Rami joins us from Philadelphia. Minu was a high school English teacher in Philadelphia for over 10 years. And her journey towards computer science is a unique one. She now, as the slide shows, is a project lead for Microsoft, working specifically in Xbox and Minecraft projects. Minu continues to educate, though. She is on the faculty at Arcadia and also shares her knowledge at conferences like this and through her authoring with a book out now. Now, I hope that hearing from someone who 10 plus years ago would have easily said, I'm not a computer science teacher, gives you perspective and helps you recognize maybe the turning point that you're faced at as you enter today and tomorrow's learning, so that as you're leaving this week and you're considering what your path is ahead and what our path is together, you feel value, you feel welcomed, and you feel empowered to contribute to our mission and our vision of accomplishing CS for all students in Pennsylvania. So please join me in welcoming Minu today.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. That was one of the kindest introductions. I've done many of these, but that was one of the most thoughtful introductions I've experienced. Thank you so much. I know I'm home, literally and metaphorically, because I'm in Pennsylvania. After living in Washington, it's good to be home. And it's also good to do my first talk after 2+ years of Zoom keynotes. How many people are like, I'm so glad I'm sitting with real people? Okay, can we just give a round of applause to this moment? At least for me, this is my first one, so it feels really special. I also know that I'm home because all the teachers are back there, and it's pretty lonely up here. So if you're a real teacher, you know that in PD, you like never sit up front. You're always in the back with your friends. But I have a friend up here, so it'll be a little less lonely. What I hope to do this morning is not really hopefully talk at you, but really start a dialogue that will continue throughout your 2 days here and beyond, and maybe prompt you to do some thinking. You know, when I saw that slide that was shown about, you know, what meaningful progress could look like for people of color, people on margins, students who come from a different socioeconomic background or racial makeup, it like occurred to me that I check every one of those boxes. And then now I have the privilege of not only doing things like this and being able to be in conversation with you, not talk at you, but be in conversation with you, but also be in places like Microsoft and to be at a director level engineering role and make hiring decisions about who gets to work on our team. And so I think it's really interesting for me to recognize my own journey, as it was said, about what it, has taken to make that transition and what good teachers and what good community can do for people when we're supported in the right ways. So that's what I hope to talk a little bit about today. I think, digital resilience was mentioned, but I hope we define resilience in more than just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and a little bit more about how can we be more thoughtful about what resilience means in today's complex world. So I think this was captured really well. My own journey from, Science Leadership Academy to my present day job. I am currently a product manager on Xbox's trust and safety team. So my team is responsible for keeping all players safe on Xbox. So we do, proactive and reactive moderation. So when your kids are playing on Xbox and they're using words that they shouldn't, or maybe playing with kids that are, maybe not being appropriate. Those are the issues that we deal with. I'm specifically responsible for all kids' safety on Xbox and all of the family experiences. So it's a little stressful, I would say, just a tiny bit stressful what I do. My journey really started with, folks like you thinking about what does teaching of reading and writing and speaking and listening. I'm a former high school English teacher, as it was mentioned. What does that mean in today's world? So, the first image on the left-hand side that you see is a teen magazine that my students produced instead of writing the typical 5-page research paper. Instead, they researched, ideas that they were interested in, things like teen jobs, or what does it mean to be dating, at that time in like 2018 in the world. And they wrote, articles based on research, incorporated authentic first-person interviews, and wrote articles specifically for a teen audience. And they published a real magazine, including the publication process, the design process, the editing process. So while I was in the classroom, I really thought about technology not as this shiny thing that I was trying to force onto my students, but really what unique affordances, if my students have a laptop in front of them, how does reading and writing change? How does publishing change? How does writing for a specific audience change? When that happens, those are the issues I grappled with. I wouldn't say I mastered it, because the best part of teaching is you never stop learning, you never stop trying to improve your craft. And then, I had the honor and the pleasure of, being invited to Gates Foundation to influence their teacher network work that they were doing at that time. Anybody heard of things like Khan Academy or Code.org? I got to fund those organizations while I was at the Gates Foundation. And then somebody came to Microsoft, and at that time, Microsoft had just bought Minecraft for one of the highest acquisition prices at that time. And they were going to start making Minecraft for schools. And on the founding team, I got to be one of the product managers thinking about how do we evolve this world's most popular game and make it appropriate for schools. So if you've used Code Builder or the agent, has anybody used that in Minecraft, coding experiences in Minecraft? Yeah, me and my team worked on that. We actually created the agent and named it, we had many, many ideas, but we went with the agent. Hope you liked it. And I got to travel to, over 30 countries around the world, and not only learn from students and teachers, but to really understand, how education works across all of these different systems and how they think about lifelong skills, how they think about CS skills. And, now I work on trust and safety. And, if you opened up a newspaper in past 6 months, the number one thing on parents' minds, on lawmakers' minds, is how do we keep kids safe on these large platforms, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, whether it's platform like mine, Xbox. So I'm incredibly fortunate for this sort of, winding path that I've been on since I started teaching. But, no matter how complex my job gets, it's never as hard and as complex as what you do. So I want to just say, thank you for all that you've been doing for, your entire career, but especially these past couple of years. I know they have been incredibly difficult, but I wasn't in your shoes. I wasn't in, shoulder to shoulder with yourselves for past 2 years. So I can't fully comprehend how hard it was. And really my deepest thanks. And if others don't say it to you, let me be the first one to say, welcome back. And thank you for what you've been doing. So, speaking of, the storm that we've all been living through, we've all have faced a lot of personal and professional hardships because of the pandemic, but not everybody has experienced them the same way. I have personally, it sounds like really crappy to say this and feels crappy to say this, but I benefited from it. I didn't want to live in Washington State where Microsoft space. So when the pandemic hit and, a lot of remote work started happening and it was kind of now okay to say, I don't really want to live here. I took the first opportunity I could to come back, quote unquote, home. And so not everybody has faced the same challenges and hardships as what teachers and frontline workers and what healthcare workers have done. And I think in a very short amount of time, we've gone from healthcare workers, frontline workers, and teachers being heroes to being like, oh, you're just complaining. And that's been really disheartening to see as someone who has been a teacher, but is now outside in the classroom. So I just want to recognize that we've all gone through a lot of hardships, but some people have suffered and have struggled a lot more than others, and we need to acknowledge it. And, during a summer when you could be off and you could be with your own children or doing things that you need to do for your mental health, you're here, you're learning, you're connecting, and that's incredible to see. We were also living through an economic turning point. Speaking of turning points that we're going through, I don't recommend this, but have you looked at your, retirement account lately? I don't, I don't recommend it. It's the quickest way to get depressed about things. But I think we're going through an interesting time. Economically, things that we thought were a hedge against inflation, the things that we thought were in place to protect, so-called basic necessities like food and gas, those things are out of control. And that's been difficult to experience, no matter what, income bracket you're in. And I think a lot of people are struggling. And, it needs to be recognized that when we're serving students, there could be things that are happening in their home that we're not privy to that could be affecting them. And one of the factors could be the economic stress that their family might be under. We're also, in a cultural turning point. And this is not about politics, whether you voted for this party or you voted for this candidate. But I don't know if you can see from where you are. And it's not even this bad because I only went to 2011. But if you look at 1953 to 2011, this is sort of showing, the overlap between Democrats and Republicans in the Congress and whether, how much overlap in beliefs and in collaboration between the two parties was to solve America's problems. Versus, starting in 1953, there's a lot of overlap and there was a lot of dialogue and a lot of compromise between the two parties to come up with solutions that affected all of us as citizens. Now, if you look at 2011, and mind you, even that feels like the golden era compared to 2022, you see the divide, a clear divide and a space growing between the two parties where conversations are not happening, compromises are not taking place. And again, I'm not trying to say like it's this is good or this is bad. In some ways, I'm saying that the systems that are supposed to be working for all of us don't seem to be working. And what's the result? Incredible inflation, basic goods that we should have access to, education, healthcare, gas, food, all of those costs have increased dramatically, but income hasn't stayed pace with it. And again, it's not about favoring one or the other. It's about who's actually working to solve our problems. And I think a lot of people right now in 2022 are frustrated because they don't feel like the people in charge are actually working on the problems that affect us at the kitchen table. This might be a little controversial, but I feel like we're in an educational turning point too. Like I said, we went very quickly from, just shut up and teach to shut up, carry a gun, be prepared to kill, to protect kids in case of a violent event at your school. And I think this is really a dangerous thing. Even the idea that, this is, instead of common sense gun control, we're actually talking about arming people. It is super scary. And no matter what side of the spectrum you fall on, this is an educational turning point for sure in our recent times. When you think about the amount of information that we're consuming, and then what's the impact on all of these conversations about, what values should be lifted up and what are the problems and how we should solve them, there is a real clear issue of unreliable information or an information bias, and that's an incredible turning point in our public conversation as well. When you look at this chart, really essentially it's saying that the more inaccurate a piece of news or a report online is, the more viral it gets, the more clicks it gets, the more attention that it gets. So it's not actually facts that are, getting the minds of folks who are coming across them. It's not really actually truth or facts that are actually being examined by people who come across them. It's rather the more hyperbolic, the more inaccurate things that are clearly not true that are gaining traction online. And believe me, I blame a lot of this on big tech, and we have a lot of responsibility and a lot of work here to do. But I think it says something about the work that remains in our classroom. What does it mean to be a digitally resilient or a digitally aware person? When was the last time that students in our classrooms examined the same piece of news from different sources and evaluated the biases? And again, this is not about left or right. It's about, being able to critically read something that's online and being able to make up your own mind about it based on your reasoning skills. And reasoning skills are not an issue of the left and right. It's the issue of the survival for our democracy. And I think that's something that we ought to think about. So, how does this all matter? Like, you're here for a CS conference. Like, what does this have to do with CS, and what's my role in any of this? And I think the argument that I'm going to try to make is that computational thinking is really about critical thinking or reasoning skills. And it very much has to do with the world that we live in, the problems that we observe, and what we might do to empower our students to address those issues. So really the question that I want to go after is computer science for what? There has been a lot of, really good facts before I got up here that were shared about the importance of computer science. But the question that I want us to grapple with is computer science for what? Because you can have code that does one thing and has one type of impact on its users, and you can have a piece of code and it has a completely different type of impact on its users. And who is to determine what type of code should, be prevalent or should be popular or should be the #1 app on Apple's App Store today? Those things will be determined by the students that we teach today. That code that will become the #1 app in the App Store 2 years from now, that kid is sitting in your classroom right now. And by grappling with these questions, computer science for what, we could have one type of world or we could have another type of world. At least would you buy into this, that, pieces of code like, Facebook or TikTok or Xbox have had some cultural impact? Raise your hand if you would at least give that a credence. They're just pieces of code. They're not these like magical things that somebody with like, puppet master control. Again, they're the very thing that you're trying to teach your students, which is how to write clear code, how to do these things, how to take a complex problem and break it up into small parts, how to do pattern recognition, how to problem solve and spot patterns. How do you identify important information and ignore irrelevant one? How do you design simple steps to solve complex problems? The very concepts that you teach, my engineering partners on my team use every single day. But along with writing and use of that code, we need to be thinking about what kind of effect do I want to have on the world with my work? And that's what I want to grapple with. And what I'm going to say for the rest of the talk is not going to be surprising to you, because I think some of you are already doing this and are already thinking about this in your own work. And I'm just here to sort of just be on the sideline and say, keep going. Like, this is the very work that we need to be doing. And as someone in the industry, when I want to hire people coming out of your classrooms or your higher education courses, these are the critical thinking skills that I want to look for when I want to hire people at Microsoft. I want people to care about the impact of the work that they do, not just be a robot and be like, okay, I can write the code. Here's the code. That's not good enough. So I will posit that, we should go back to the basics in some ways. The 6 C's that we've all been thinking about and talking about for many, many years in education. What would that look like alongside the concepts of coding and computer science? How might you shift your practice, or how might you continue your practice if you think about the concepts of computer science alongside the ideas of communication, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, community, and character, as part of the learning process. So when we really start to think about communication, essentially when you're teaching coding, you're really teaching a new language acquisition. And what you're teaching is, can you clearly articulate what it is that you want to do in those steps and in the language where others will be able to understand? The best sign of a well-written code is someone can look at it and understand what it's supposed to do without having to run it. And that's a sign of clear communication. So in what ways can coding and writing go hand in hand in your classroom? And what are the unique opportunities to explore the same way we value coding as having the value of teaching writing well, writing clearly in our classroom? What's the number one gap that I see between, entry-level programmers versus really accomplished and, highly promoted and promotable engineers at Microsoft? They document really well. They document their work really well. They care about not just what they have done, but can someone pick up their work and follow it and build on it? And that's the number one skill that we look for. And when we talk about that clarity and that clear communication, really we're going down to the basis of really well communication. So this is the same skills that I was talking about 10 years ago in my classroom of reading, writing, speaking, listening. Can your students do that really well? When we think about collaboration, what unique affordances can paired coding have in your classroom? You don't have to do this, but this is just an idea or inspiration for you. these are two teenagers, in my former hometown in Seattle. During the pandemic, they created an app so that people who don't have the same level of resources can find, whether it's shelter, whether it's food programs, whether it's job programs, because everyone was going through hard time during the pandemic, but people who are disadvantaged were going through even harder time. So they basically created an app that can work in any state where people can access these resources and start to build a path toward more independence. And so this is an idea of just paired coding. How might coding challenges in your classroom change? Instead of every student struggling on their own, they were paired with people intentionally, and then they were given the responsibility and the opportunity to solve real world problems. What might that do for your teaching and the relevance for what you're trying to do? When we talk about creativity and Notion, this is also not a new idea. You're already doing this. Think of a prompt like program a character to move across the screen to score a goal. And, allow them to make up the rules, allow them to choose the sport, allow them to choose a style. Imagine the creativity that might flourish with both an example, but also the opportunity to work on an open creative problem like this. What might your students create? Who knows? Their code could become, wildly popular mobile app. You don't know. You don't know till you try, and you don't know till you create the conditions in your classroom for how this might look or work. And these are things that you're already doing. These are tools you're already using, but you're just shifting who is the audience, where is the opportunity, where is the real world application of this idea. Again, what might critical thinking and problem solving look like if your students were addressing real world issue like Tanvi is in this example? As a 17-year-old, she's building an app that helps keep women safe on college campuses. And it's like a buddy app. You say, I'm leaving the library at 10 p.m. The app also finds somebody who's leaving near the same time, connects you, and you can walk back to the dorm, hopefully safely together. Again, this is not groundbreaking ideas. We've had other apps like this. We've had other solutions like this. The idea is that this is a problem that the students saw and wanted to care enough to invest the real world time and effort in creating something that meant something to her, that solves a problem for her and her group of peers. And what might those things look like for your students? It might not be a buddy walk home app, but what would that particular students that you're still thinking about over the summer, what unique problem would they solve if they were empowered and given the opportunity to do so? Another same idea, I think despite our ability to connect with anyone, anywhere, at any time, we're more alone together than ever. And so Ariana is creating an app that promotes mental health for, LGBTQ students in her community. And again, it's not about one particular group of underrepresented students. It's about what are the unique problems that your students might solve if given real world opportunities to solve the problems that they care about. And lastly, the number one thing that I would, guess that we will need in over the next 2 decades in computer science is not really elegant code bases that make AI more accessible or cheaper or powerful. We're nearly there for that. But it's about AI that is as free of bias as it can be. So ProPublica, a well-recognized journalistic group of people, did an analysis of decisions that were made regarding criminal justice system and sentences that people could get if they committed crime. And they were using an AI algorithm to really help judges make predictions about who was likely to recommit a crime if they were let go. And they clearly found a bias when it came to people of color. Now imagine the large scale impact of this across the country and the world. And so alongside the ability to write well-written code, elegant code, efficient code, is the ability to understand where there might be bias in the data that we're using, in the algorithms that we're creating. And this is not like futuristic, I saw it in a movie this summer. This is happening right now. Criminal justice systems around our country are using AI-based sentence recommendation systems. So whether we've had this hardship in our life or not, whether we've known somebody who's been tangled up in our justice system or not, this is affecting our entire country, and it has, life-altering and lifelong impact on the people who are biased by an algorithm. And if I can be so bold as to, suggest a 7C, this is the revelation. This is why you brought me here. I'm going to be so bold as to say 6 C's are great, but I think we need a 7th one. And I'm going to call it consciousness or self-awareness. And this is the #1 skill that I look for when I hire product managers or coders or engineers or developers. I look for their ability to understand their own biases, their own areas of strengths, and their own areas of weaknesses. Do they have enough self-awareness to know how do they work in a specific dynamic? What are the unique ways they can contribute to a team? What are some areas of growth for them that they will need to continue to work on lifelong? And, are they excited about contributing to a piece of work or a vision bigger than themselves? That requires self-awareness. You've all had a colleague like this, somebody who is self-aware and somebody who you turn to when you have a hard time at work. How many people know somebody like this in their life? They're balanced, they're thoughtful. You can talk to them when you're up or when you're down. And they just have this unique way of seeing the world that makes your life richer. Now, this is not something that you can buy a curriculum for. This is not something that you can, go to a keynote and be like, I'm going to bring that practice back. This is about you yourself doing it, you yourself modeling it, and then you creating those conditions in your classroom where it's okay to fail. Students can start this lifelong work. Also, this is not something that you get it and you're done. This is something that is so subtle, so refined that all of us, not just students, but humans have to work towards for the rest of our lives. And something I work towards every single day of my life. I journal, I meditate, I take the time to distance from myself when I'm triggered by things at work. I talk to the very same people that you raise your hands about, who have a deeper and longer understanding of life than I do. And I try to grow. I try to intentionally grow my skills so that I can continue to be a better leader. So what does it even mean to be creative? Has anybody tried DALL-E Mini online? After this keynote, just search for DALL-E Mini on your favorite search tool. I'm not going to mention the G word because I work for Microsoft. Okay, you got one corny laugh. I tried it while building these slides. It was kind of fun. I put in, for the first one, I put in sun peeking out from the trees, and an AI model came up with the first image on its own. That's all the prompt was, sun peeking out from trees. Then I was like, let's go crazy. I said beach in outer space. That's the middle image, and this is AI generated. I didn't have to pay a graphic designer. I didn't have to go on Fiverr and find somebody to create a logo or an image for me. And then on the last one, because I'm obsessed with mid-century modern homes, I said mid-century modern home against trees. As you can see, I'm kind of obsessed with trees right now. I'm thinking a lot about trees. And the AI came up with the image on the far, your right. And again, this is free. You can access it today, and this AI is going to get bigger and better. So what does it mean to be a graphic designer when this skill exists? I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the questions. This morning, general availability of Deep Coder became available from Microsoft. I didn't plan this. Basically, it is GitHub's Copilot. We own GitHub. GitHub's Copilot allows you to basically have AI help you write code. So if you start writing a piece of code, it will auto-suggest the next word to finish your code line. Have you experienced it in Gmail when you say, I'm running late, and then it suggests I'll be right there or whatever, or in your text message? Same idea, auto suggestions to finish code. What does it mean to be a good coder when an AI can write the code? The reason I bring this up is not to say that the statistics that were shared before about need for CS, is irrelevant. I think for a long time, we will have human and machine working together to write code and to write better and larger pieces of code. But again, I say this to say computer science for what? If a machine can write the code, what is the unique human value that when your students try to get a job at a place like Microsoft will bring? And to me, those are the 7 C's that I think I mentioned. Because if somebody exhibited some of those skills, they'd be on top of my hire list, and perhaps yours too. So what do your students need in this world of DALL-E and Deep Coder? The answer is still the same as it ever was. They need you. They need you to create the circumstances in your classrooms to try difficult things, interesting things, have opportunity to succeed and fail, because we often learn more from our failure than our successes. Success is often a lousy teacher. And lastly, a role model for what lifelong learning looks like, what a self-awareness in 22nd century looks like. And by being here, I think you're demonstrating that. I think our kids need places like Dream Space. This is one of my favorite things that we do as Microsoft. In Ireland, we have something called Microsoft Dream Space. It's basically a maker space for research-based STEM experiences. And kids, without paying anything, without being special enough to attend, anywhere where if they can get to it. We have after school programs where they can learn coding, where they can learn STEM related projects. During the day, school groups come. We don't charge anything. We're not trying to sell Microsoft products. It's just a great place with people who love kids and people who love STEM. I know the people who run them, and it kind of makes me sad because whenever I think about it, I'm like, why is there only one? And why is there only one in Dublin? Why don't we have these everywhere? So my challenge to you and Patan will be, what would a Patan dream space? I don't think you can use dream space because it says trademark, but come up with your own. Microsoft lawyers will be all over you. What would your dream space look like in your community? Start small and then dream big, pun intended. And then, the last person that I will leave you with, and someone that you should read and look up if you haven't, is this Israeli philosopher, historian, Yuel Hariri, who's been super influential to me in my past 5, 7, 10 years of thinking about education. He says that we're getting to the point where algorithms can hack us. We are the first generation of living humans who will be hacked by machines. So far, we've been hacking machines. Now, machines are going to hack us. What does it mean to be hacked by a machine? Corporations and governments can manipulate your desires and press your emotional buttons when in their interest. Raise your hand if you've seen something on Instagram and then bought it and said, why did I do that? Okay, not enough people are honest in this room, and that's concerning. That is a huge concern. Everybody's done it. That was algorithm manipulating you to make a purchase when you didn't need it. He suggests, the answer is same as it ever was. Socrates said, know thyself. The answer is get to know yourself better. There's nothing new about this advice, but what is new is now we have competition. So the students that you're teaching today, the machines that they use, the algorithms that they use, know them better than the students know themselves. That's something really scary that we should think about. And what your unique superpower is, you can help your students know themselves better. And so if I can urge you to do anything, is to create conditions where the students can know their unique strengths, what unique contributions they can make in the world, and then what are those unique things that they need to work on to continue to grow, to continue to be a self-aware person. The things that I'm currently reading are always, a revelation of how I'm doing mentally. I'm reading a lot of Greek philosophy. I'm reading a lot of Buddhist teachings because I think, the past 2 years have been hard, but it's not over. And we need to continue to build our resilience. So some of the ways that I'm thinking about building my resilience is to go to old texts, like old friends, so that I can keep being new and I can keep facing new challenges. And if you found anything that I said today helpful or interesting, my editor calls my book My Love Letter to Teachers, which is the best thing anybody's ever said about my work. And these are some of the places that you can find me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Minu. We really appreciated that. You definitely inspired me. I did text my friend who's my self-awareness buddy, who reminds me consistently of where I am and making sure I'm staying balanced. Also, you put a deep fear into me. Now I think iRobot is definitely going to come true. So I don't know if I have the energy for that. But thank you so much for kicking off our summit. We are really excited about getting started today. Before I let you officially go to your first set of sessions for today, I want to just run through a few housekeeping things. To start with, you should have all received name badges when you registered. In case you missed a registration table, we moved it a little bit further up, so you should be able to grab those name tags. Those name tags are a little important just because on the back side of them, you'll see a QR code. That QR code will take you to our summit webpage, which has all of the important information about Act 48 and also a button that will lead you to Sketch. If you are here virtually with us,
Recording stopped.
Okay. If you are here virtually with us, then you will find that schedule exactly where you found this link. So good job, you're already there. So if you are trying to get into Sketch and for whatever reason you don't know what the password is 2022 CSNPA, all lowercase. It's also up on the board so you can have it there. Don't feel rushed to get there. So I do want to let you know lunch is provided both days. We are ready for that. During lunch today, we're going to have some lunch and learn booths set up. These lunch and learn booths will let you interact with different types of products that might be out there. It might let you talk to the people who are experts in these products, who have already integrated it into the classrooms. So please be sure they will be set up along the perimeter of the lunchroom. That's all happening in conference room 2, so we're here right now. And then we will also have a PDE PIMS data booth set up in the back. We have representatives from PDE who are going to be here, who can answer all of your PIMS questions. I know there's a lot of them, so we brought in an expert to handle that as well. I would also ask you to stop by because there is a giveaway that we're going to be working through with the PIMS booth. So definitely stop by and check that out. The next thing is our panels. We are so fortunate this year to have 3 different panels. We were trying to capture as many of the different communities within CS education. So we have our student panel, which is happening this afternoon. It will be our NC WIT awardees. So you met some of them today, and then you'll see some virtual and some in person. So that will be at the end of today, which is at 2:15. We're also going to have a higher education panel. That's part of our concurrent sessions. It'll happen in the next room. Bill Mogan's going to be our moderator for that. So please make sure you attend that. And then finally, we have our teacher panel tomorrow. These are going to be our CS educator exemplars who are finalists. So they'll be there as well, talking about what their experiences within CS education so far. So we hit pretty much all 3 of the big communities within CS. The next thing is our optional drone networking happy hour. This is totally optional, but everyone is welcome. We're going to have experts from our Build Fly Code program present to talk to you about how they've incorporated drones within their schools and what they've done and what they found helpful. So we will have tons of food. We're going to have snacks, desserts, non-alcoholic beverages. So please be sure to stop by for that. That starts at 3:30. And finally, the Act 48 question that I always get is the attendance will be at the final session. We are not doing codes for each session. So don't stress out about that until tomorrow after our end note. You will all have QR codes for that, and you'll be all able to complete that if that is something you're interested in. So if you are a first-time person to attend one of these conferences, I encourage that you stay in this room. Sarah Fry is going to be walking through what we do as a CSMPA team, what's been happening in computer science in Pennsylvania, and kind of giving you that foundational knowledge of what's happening. If you are not a first-time attendee, and this is you've been around the show, you know what you're doing, then I suggest that you go to any of the other sessions that are happening. That's all provided in Sketch. Paper copies are also at the registration booth, as well as a map. Even if you've been here before, I highly recommend a map. I think I've gotten lost like several times. So I recommend that. We hope you enjoy the conference, and thank you so much for being here in person and or virtually. We appreciate everything you've done for us so far, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. All right, so I'll see you guys soon.